Thank you as you're taking your seats for this school shootings class. Principal Doctor, good to see you, sir. If you would, the sheriff is ready to begin. So thank you, all who are staying in, thank you. At this time, as we prepare to begin our workshop, School Shootings, it is an honor to bring before us today Sheriff Kimbrell, the Sheriff of Forsyth County here. That's Winston-Salem, and he is a brother. He is a brother. Thank God for that as we share membership in the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. As he comes today, let us put our hands together and give him a General Baptist welcome. Sheriff Kimbrell.
I'm good. First of all, I want to say good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. I want to give a special thanks to the convention. I want to give a special thanks to the sent angel of this house and all the houses that you represent. But I'd be remiss if I didn't give thanks to the author of my life. Thank God for what he's doing, what he's done in my life, the blessings that he's given me. And I got to thank him for this day, this moment in time that we're living in. You know, the truth be told, we really didn't deserve to be in this moment in time, but it was grace and mercy that allowed us to be here. I'm Bobby Kimbrell. I'm originally from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Just give a brief introduction. I started my career in law enforcement in 1984 with the Winston-Salem Police Department. I spent 6 years there, and I spent the rest of my career as a special agent with the U.S. Department of Justice as a special agent. I spent a lot of time overseas, Bogota, Haiti, Colombia, and Dominican Republic, and just traveling the world. I came back home, retired in 2016, and God had another mission for me. And I decided to try my hand at this thing called politics. And so I entered the race, and God smiled on me, and we won the election in 2018. God smiled again, and we won it again in 2022. But one of the most important things that I love about doing the office of the people, the sheriff work, is that I get a chance to meet wonderful people like you. I get a chance to go out through the state and through the country and talk about various topics. And so when I got the invite to come and speak to you on school shootings, I started thinking to myself, not knowing that it would be relevant. And the question is, what is the church's role in school shootings? And so I started thinking about that. I could ask that question again. What is the church's role as it relates to opioid overdoses? I could ask the same question. What is the church's role in the gun violence that we have in our community? I could even ask you, what is the role of oxygen to life? Will the answer to that question be the same thing that the church is to life? What I would tell you is that the church is the most powerful entity in our society. I have concluded that through life experiences that I have been through. And so I stopped by here to share something with you. I want to talk about school shootings and the role of the church in our community. And I guess the best way to enter into this conversation is to tell you a story about a church fire that happened some years ago. And you may have heard the story. There was a church fire some years ago in a small town, Michigan. And they tell me that the members showed up at the church somewhere around 11 o'clock, and they started taking the things from the church outside to get air so they could air out. They took the cross, they took pictures, they took various things. And one of the neighborhood moms witnessed all of this, and she stood there and she kept shaking her head saying, And one of the deaconess walked up to her and said, why are you saying that? And the neighborhood mom responded by saying, it is a shame that the church had to catch on fire before y'all brought Jesus into the streets. What I'm telling you is that the streets are burning. Schools are being shot. Children are dying. Mothers are crying. So the question is, what is the role of the church? That's really an easy answer. You know, people say, what do you bring into the picnic? Or what do you bring to the table? I bring the table. The church is the foundation of our community. The church is the foundation of our society. You know, I see this every day. I see a decaying, not only of America, but I see a decaying of our society, especially, and I'm a truth teller, especially in the black and brown community. We are suffering because we are lost. And I say that, and I go back to the scriptures, Numbers and 13, where it talks about the people seeing themselves as grasshoppers versus giants. You know, the scripture talks about, so as a man thinketh, so is he. So when it relates to shootings and all the things that are happening in our society, the church has a role in changing that. If you look at, I'll go home to September the 1st, where we had an actual shooting in our school. You probably saw the news, young man lost his life. William, he died. I'll never forget what I had on that day. I'll never forget what I was doing when the call came out. Shots fired in the school. I was actually on 4th Street at Mellow Mushrooms. And when we got to the school, what I saw, I'll never forget. And since then, I started to question a lot of things in my life. I started to question a lot of things in our society. And here's what I have concluded as relates to violence and things that are happening in our community. If we are to save our communities and save our schools, we've got to leave the sanctuary and go to the streets. It is a must. It is a must. It is a must. And I'll tell you why it's a must, because, you know, the scripture talks about they've got to hear the word. They definitely got to hear it, because our children are reading at 2nd and 3rd grade levels. And how can they not hear the word if not for the pastors and not for the church? So you have an obligation to change the narrative as it relates to school shootings. So the question is, what can we do to change the narrative? I could talk to you about tactical operations all day long. I could talk to you about so many things which to me would be irrelevant as it relates to from a church standpoint. I've been in tactics all my life, 40 years in this game of law enforcement. But what I stopped by here to talk to you about having community credibility in the communities in which we represent. What I will tell you as I travel around this country is that there's a decaying of memberships in the church. That's just my little humble opinion. I apologize if I step on toes, but that's what I'm seeing. Not only have we lived through COVID, we lived through social unrest, two of the most difficult times in American history in the last 20 years, 20 and 21. We were hit with 2 pandemics, social unrest as well as COVID. Both are contagious and both are very deadly. It tore us apart. It tore our children apart. Our children were lost. Most of our kids didn't have internet service. They didn't have a way to link on to what's going on in the school. So thus they fell behind. What is the role of the church? As I look around in my community, we have things that are happening, probably which would be nowhere different than Durham or nowhere in this state. Where is the role of our people? They need us. They need you. I heard Dr. Lowe, who was my senator from Winston-Salem, he talked about he needed that word, and I saw the people raise their hands and say that word was for me. That word was for all of us. Because so many times in life, we hear the word and it changes our lives. You know, I talk to my boys. I have 7 sons. You know, 7. I tell the story about my boys all the time, about how the church saved my life. It did. The church saved my life. In 2005, I lost my wife. I was left to raise boys with my mother, my father. But it was Dr. Mack who told me that I needed the word, who told me I need to come to church, who told me I need to get involved in the church. And because of that, it changed my life. And here's what I'm going to tell you as it relates to school shootings. You know, we talk about so as a man thinketh, so is he. So go with me on this. The meditation creates the articulation, which sets you up for the presentation, which creates a representation for your desired destination. In other words, if our young men and women don't have the foundation and the principles of the church, you will have the school shootings. You will have the drive-by shootings. Those of you that know the theory of the hierarchy of needs, Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs. He looked at it in a pyramid form. At the top of the pyramid, he talked about self-actualization. At the bottom of it, he talked about the basic needs, the basic needs. In order for you to reach this thing of self-actualization, your basic needs have to be met. Food, clothing, shelter. Here's what I'm telling you. There are children that basic needs are not being met. If the basic needs are not being met, then I ask the rhetorical question, what is the role of the church? What is the role of the church? I tell you, I was looking at some statistics that there were 600 school shootings last year. There were over 100,000 people that died from gun violence. And the number keeps going. I can tell you in Forsyth County, we've had 781 documented fights in the schools, which would probably be no different if I was to ask you the same number in Durham, Wake, Mecklenburg. Since August, when school opened, 780 documented fights. Well, somebody asked me the question, of that percentage, what were the race? Do they look like us, the black and brown? Well, I don't even have to ask the question nor answer the question because you already know the answer. So my question is this. When we talk to those young men and women, and when we talk to them and we ask them questions and we try to get at the core of them, they're lost. We've got to go back to the streets. Every time I come down 4th Street, I see a group of people standing recruiting. I need us to go back to our neighborhoods. We cannot be afraid of our children. We cannot be afraid to go through our own communities. We cannot. Where would all of us be without the church? When I said the church saved my life, I wasn't saying that for sound bites. I was telling you the truth. It was love and the principles of the gospel that made me realize I was a giant. Because the truth of the matter, life has a way of beating us sometimes. Life will make you think some things that are really not true. Life will affect your mental health. And the truth of the matter is there's no health without mental health. And so the church was therapy for me. The church gave me the ability to think beyond where I was at. It taught me the ability that I don't walk by sight, I walk by faith. Everything that I am today, I claimed it before I got it. My Aunt May, those are the old saints in here may can relate to what I'm saying, but some of the new saints may not can relate to this. As a young boy, I burnt my leg playing around on a neighbor's motorcycle, and my leg was burning and burning and burning. My mother sent me to my auntie's house, and she said, I'm gonna talk the fire out of your leg. And when she said that, I said to my auntie, what do you mean you're gonna talk the burn out of my leg? In other words, she's gonna talk the pain out of my body. And those of you know it works. She talked about the kings and some things and those some things. And here's what I would tell you is that it worked. And here's what she told me, is that the tongue has the power of life and death. And if life is the beginning of the continuum and death is the end, that means that the church has the ability to control everything. So the question becomes, what is the role of the church? I can tell you that the day that William died and lost his life, I can tell you that the little boy that shot him, I can't go into particulars because the case hadn't been tried. But what makes a young man so angry that he wants to take someone else's life? That's absence of God. What makes our children show up like they do? That's absence of God. What makes our children hate somebody that looks like them? That's absence of knowledge. Many people die for the lack of knowledge. People perish for the lack of knowledge. All of us in this room have an obligation to change the narrative. we have an obligation to stop the school shootings. Every day, someone is dying. We've had more people die from gunshots, black and brown, than died in the Vietnam War. Those are facts. And we were fighting a foreign enemy. I am baffled sometimes at what's happening. The things that I ask for in my community is that it's all hands on deck right now. Those that have been in the military, it's all hands on deck. If you lead a church, you pastor a church, woman or man, I need you in your community. Because here's what I would tell you. Our kids are being undereducated. Just telling you facts. Just check the numbers. They're not hidden, they're real. Every day, or every Monday, I get a report on the number of people that are incarcerated in the Forsyth County Detention Center. Every Monday. Yesterday, we were at 725. Forsyth is the 4th largest county in the state. Mecklenburg and Wake go back and forth depending on how many students show up in North Carolina State. So it might be Wake, then it might be Mecklenburg, then there's Gifford, then there's Forsyth. But what I'm telling you is that when you got 700 plus men and women that are not a part of a community, that are away from their children and their children are raising themselves, what is the role of the church? You know, when I got the invitation to talk about school shootings, I drove all the way down here with all this material in this bag to talk about school shootings, run, duck, hide, fight. I came down here thinking about church security. And as I was talking to Pastor Barr, he and I had a very interesting conversation. And I said to him is that my spirit tells me I've got to spin this in the role of the church. How do we change the narrative? So I don't want to talk the whole, I want to engage you, because what I've learned in sharing some things is that many heads are better than one. What I want to share with you is that we've got to change the way our children think, how they see themselves. We've got to change that. It is a must that we change that. You know, one of my favorite scriptures is that I love reading is, it talks about Acts 16:25. I love that scripture. And it said right around midnight. It's relevant. And it talks about at midnight. And if you really examine that scripture, there are 24 different time zones in the world. Why did they say at midnight? Midnight is the only common denominator of the 24 different time zones where one day stops and another one begins. And it talked about the miracle at midnight, how the shackles fell off and the door swung open. But when I looked at that, I started asking myself, what caused that? They didn't say, Lord, help me. They started praising him. It was the praise that freed them. So my question is, we've got to teach our children how to praise him. We've got to teach our children how to humble themselves. Because here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't care where you live. I don't care how big your house is. I don't care what the square footage is. It's coming to a neighborhood near you soon. You could not have told me that there would be shootings at Haynes Mall. You couldn't have told me that there would be shootings at the mall in Charlotte. You couldn't have told me that years ago. You couldn't have convinced me of that. You couldn't have told me that we would have the violence that we're having in our schools. You could not have told me that. But when I talk to the bean counters, when I talk to the men and women that I used to work with at the federal level, they do what is called a 202 form. A 202 form is when someone is arrested, it is an information form. So every time we took someone into federal custody, we filled out a 202 form on them. And one of the key questions on there that was very interesting to me, it asks you religional preferences. And what we were finding is that a lot of the folk that looked like us were starting to put in no preference. No preference. In other words, they were ashamed to claim him. You know, one of the greatest things that happened to me, and then I'm gonna start to wrap it up and allow you to ask some questions. I love being transparent, I do, because there's strength in the struggle. My story has empowered me. My story has taken me to places that I never would have got a chance to go. And I used to question, why did God send me through the things that he sent me through? I don't know about you all, but I fell out of love with God one time in my life. I don't know if you've ever been angry with God, but I appreciate that, sister. I appreciate that. I appreciate we got some truth tellers. But there was a point in my life where I fell out of love with God. I asked God, why did he send me through this? Why did I lose everything that was valuable to me? I lost house, wife, cars, and I was angry. I had to learn how to eat off the dollar menu. I had to learn how to eat oodles and noodles. I had to learn how to count corns in my bucket. And I had a friend of mine, Elmer Davis, who was an elder at the Powerhouse of Deliverance. And he would tell me all the time, it's just be faithful. Because God gonna give you double for your troubles. And he told me to keep being faithful. Keep believing beyond the midnight. Keep praising him. Keep doing what you're doing. And you know what's interesting about that? Is that when I got ready to run, the reporter came and asked me, why should the people trust you with $90 million when you lost your house? And what he said to me, he said, and why should the people trust you when you had some rough patches in your life? And my answer to him was this, is that God set me up for a time such as this. And what I told him was this, because I used to wonder, why did God bring me here? Because I was retired. I prayed about it. I had no intentions of getting into politics. I had no intentions of it. And everything that I've been through, not only did he give me double for my troubles, he brought me to be the message and to give the truth. And every day I share that with the men and women. We've got to get back to the church. We got to get back. You've got to be creative with programming, because the new color of hope is green. You've got to have something that draws them in. And then once you have them in, that's when you start to shape them. In other words, God's presence changes lives. Your presence changes lives. When the pastors of your church, or if you are the pastor, when you walk and you don the pulpit, the atmosphere changes in your church. And what I'm telling you is that the atmosphere is a strange thing when you really understand it. You know, you talked about the different levels of the atmosphere, the mesosphere, the stratosphere, the exosphere, and you talk about it, every level of the atmosphere, change is taking place if you're present. What I'm telling you is the church has to be present in this atmosphere that we're in. When you're present, you have the ability to affect the atmosphere. In other words, when the organ was going and the choir was going, I was watching on the monitors, the energy was electric in here. The atmosphere had been changed. So to conclude that when you affect the atmosphere, or you change the atmosphere, you affect the outcome. You affecting the outcome. So if you're not in the communities, if you're not in the school, if you're not present, then you're not affecting the atmosphere. You're not. You're not. You're not. We're better than this. We're stronger than this. I asked God to do me a favor. And the favor was, God, if you allow me to win this election, I'm going to speak truth. I'm not going to give it to you what's black, what's white, what's Republican, what's Democrat, but what's right. What's right. We're losing too many of our babies. We are. Those of you that are from Winston, you saw the news feed last Saturday night. Young girl dead in the street, 2-year-old baby, shot. The number of violence that is happening in our community has to stop. And here's the thing, the police department can't save you. I'm just being honest with you. Law enforcement is responding to the situation. They are responding. In other words, responding means after the fact. After the fact. But your prayer, the church can prevent it. The question is, what we gonna do? And what's so amazing about this, we were sitting in the room back there, and Barr was telling me that there are, 1,600 churches that are a member of the convention? So imagine this, let's do some mathematics. If there are 1,600 churches in the Baptist Convention, and let's just say that each church got 200-300, do the math of the power of the church. That's power. That's energy. That's resources. Can you imagine when the Baptist Convention call up and say, listen, this is the Baptist Convention, I want to speak to the governor. Somebody coming to the phone, because you represent about 500,000 votes. Somebody coming to the phone. And when you say, we gonna do this, we gonna do this, and here's what I need for you to do, unless you do this, we've got to demand some things. The church is a giant, not a grasshopper. And it's gotta be led by giants who are fearless, who don't mind speaking truth to power. Because if not, we'll keep having balloon releases, we'll keep having a lot of sad singing, flower bringing, and babies dying. The undertaker told me they ran out of space at Evergreen. They have literally run out of space at the cemetery. That's how fast our babies are dying. What are we gonna do? So I ask you the question, this is a rhetorical question. What is the role of the church? The church has so many roles in every aspect of life. The church is the foundation of life. So I encourage you to go back from whence you come. Be that difference. Go to the schools. Demand to know what's going on. Demand to know the policies in the schools. Demand to know how many of our kids are failing, reading below grade level. Demand to know that how many kids are coming to school hungry. Because violence is the language of the poor. Because they have nothing to live for. Facts. Facts. Get involved. That's the role of the church in school shootings. That's the role of the church in gun violence. That's the role of the church in opioid overdose. That's the role of the church in every aspect of life. So I have 5 minutes left, and I will allow you to ask me any questions you want to ask. If there may be something that I may have missed or something that I wanted to share, but I intentionally did not want to talk tactical or church security with you. That I know when I came in the church, I head up security for Bishop Ellis and the Global Fellowship for years, traveling all over the world with the gatherings. And so church security, I could do it in my sleep, but that ain't what I wanted to talk about. And I told Barr that there's so much more out there than that. I need the church to know from a layman's perspective. Because see, you see the 6 o'clock news, you see the newspaper. You don't smell the gunpowder still in the air. You don't see the blood leaving the head. You don't smell the flesh. And you don't hear the screams in your ears. And you probably don't toss and turn at night like I do. I need somebody to help me stop tossing and turning. I need somebody to help me stop hearing the screams. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Pastor Weeks, who he is a part of the sheriff's office as well as he's a minister, a pastor in Reedsville. He is our victim assistance coordinator. So let me tell you what the church could do. It just came to me. So many times when there is a homicide in your city, who is doing the aftercare or counseling with these families? A lot of these families don't have the funding to go see professional help. They don't. That mother needs you. They need your wisdom. Just don't send the flour and the chicken and the green beans and the rice and the corn. They need to see you the week after. You need to send one of your members who's strong by to sit and chat with them. Because they done tried everything else. They just waiting on somebody to come get them and bring them to the church house. There's a generation out there now that you have to go get them and bring them. We literally are, our applicants that are applying with the sheriff's office, we literally are holding their hands through the entire process to get them in the door. And once they get in the door, they're on automatic. If you get them in the door, they're looking for work to do in your church. You could start your own victim assistance programming in your church. You can start your own healing group in your church. There are a lot of people hurting. All of us have been hurt by something or somebody. Very few of us have been healed. The role of the church. So I thank you. I thank God for allowing me to be here with you. If you have a question, I'll be glad to answer it. Anything you want to ask, anything you want to share with me, again, I'm grateful. Question? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I can hear you. I'll repeat it for you.
Thank you. Okay, give me stay. Give me right here.
Do whatever you want to do. Man. This is your house, it's my house, right? Our house.
Good afternoon, everyone. So one of the things I like to share that myself and my husband still do is that when we moved from Chapel Hill to Durham, and my girls had never been pretty much in a predominantly black atmosphere because we grew up we lived in a predominant white community, but both of my daughters played sports. And so what we soon discovered being at Hillside High School, that a lot of the young ladies especially and young men that was there was from single family household. And so in college, my husband was part of Omega Psi Phi, and he was part of Omega Champs, which is a mentor program. So what we started doing was that we pretty much adopted the girls and went into their homes, got to know the mom, because most of them had just the mom in the home. And we adopted them as our daughters. A lot of the girls' grades were suffering and just had a lot of dynamics. So they came to our house, they ate at our table, what area they was weak in. We got supplemental books from all kind of resources to bring up their grades. And pretty much the only requirement that we had of them was that they had to attend church with us. We went to teachers, talked with the teachers, and most teachers I found out that if you're weak in the subject but you show interest, they will work with you. You have to have your presence there. And so, like I said, they was like extended families. As they grew, most of them got scholarships, went on to college, but they came back and thanked us for just our love and our interest in us. So in terms of the church got to go outside the church and invest in what you believe. But that worked for us. To this day, we still mentor. They're all ages. Most of them are grown now, got families, but they came back and thanked us. So that's one of the tools that the church can do. You have to go outside the church and meet them where they are.
That's a very good point. As she was saying, there are so many things that we can do from mentoring groups, from not only mentoring groups, but start programs in the church to where you're taking kids. If you decided, hey, I'm gonna get a group of kids in my church, I'm gonna take them to a college once a month. You know, we have programs like that set up in the Forsyth County where, as a matter of fact, we're leaving in the morning going to D.C. with a group of kids that have never been outside of Winston-Salem. You know, we've got to start to show kids something that they've never seen before, or to give them something to hope for. And most of you all that come from churches here, you have space. In other words, you have room to bring them, to tutor them, to teach them, to do so many things with them that could change the narrative and their trajectory. Yes, sir, my brother.
My name is Jerry Ratcher. You said Forsyth. I work at Alexander Juvenile Detention Center. I get a kid from Forsyth every week, from murder to whatever you name it. We have stopped being the village in our community. The church is the foundation, the pillar of the community, but we're not visible. When we have kids in detention and people come see them, they never see anyone like us. It's always someone else. And then I say to the kids and the church, who's going to touch them when they leave here? If we are not going to be the pillar of the community, why are we having the community? If we're not going to be the foundation, why we are not at these churches, at these facilities. Forsyth shut their detention center down. Alexander County gets them. Guilford County gets them. That's just 2 places. We have over 30 kids sometime across the state that's sleeping on the floor because we're overcrowded. And the sad thing is, some of those kids may be murderers that's on the floor because we're crowded. I hate to send a kid back out into an environment that has not changed, because that kid cannot be successful. Everything he said is real. And if you don't believe it, just ride through Winston sometime. Just being a beacon in your community can make a difference. I see it every day. And it's not about how much money you got. Our kids need male role models. Our females need female role models. And our community need role models. We have babies raising babies. We have grandparents raising babies that they can't keep up with. But until you show interest and leave these walls and stop being afraid to go into the community which you grew up in, it hasn't changed, we've changed. And until we get back on the horse, they're gonna ride out and kill every week, because I tell you this, since they changed the age to 18 years old, crime has gotten higher with murder.
Yes, sir.
I was a junior high basketball coach. I coach AAU basketball. And so what we did with AAU basketball, we got kids from Hereford County, Bertie County, Martin County, and what we did, we networked. And we put these guys on the same team. And so we just brought a lot of love. We prayed with them. But the thing, it costs a lot of money. And so me and a guy named Barry Ford, we were paying almost really like $3,000 out of our pockets to take these kids to Florida, New York City, different places and to play ball. But what I'm saying, when we took all these kids to these different places, we networked. And they knew one another, and we all said, well, look, if something ever happens in a town or you break down or something, you always can call one of these young men. And so we got together, we did that networking, but I'm not doing AAU anymore. I'm not coaching junior high basketball anymore, because a lot of that stuff is expensive. And so when you say, what can the churches do? When you have a program out there like the program that I was doing, We couldn't get our church, one of our churches, well, I say one or two of our churches helped us, but it costs a lot of money to have that stuff done. And so I don't even know if churches even have funds set aside for that. We took them, we prayed with them, we talked to them about the Bible. So we did a lot of things with them. And a lot of the young kids now that I had back then, they're grown up, they have family. But one thing I can say, they never forgot me. I don't care where they see me at. They say, "What's up, Coach Hyman?" And so that's some things that we got to do. I just put that out there.
So that goes back to when we talked about the power of the church. Think about this for a second, right? It's not what you're asking for, it's who's asking. In other words, in life, sometimes one man can ask for something, but the convention can ask for it, and it's a different answer. There is no money shortage in America. Trust me. So you can tell me that the church, the convention, the Baptist convention, let's say 300,000 strong, can't tell McDonald's, can't tell Nike that we need X amount of money to help create mentorship at our foundation, at our convention. And we needed to come here, and then we decide where it's going to be disseminated to. Don't tell me that, because here's what I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to bring the mic to you, ma'am. In Winston-Salem, we decided we wanted to do a program with kids 5 days a week. We decided it was going to cost $347,000 to do this program year long. That's not in my budget. So I started thinking, who are the power brokers in this community? Who are the folk that undercurrent that got that money? There's about 5 families in Winston that are billionaires. So I didn't just say Bobby's asking. I said the sheriff's office in the community. I need you. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you what you need to do. Because guess what? All of these places are making money off of us. Somebody is making money off of this convention. Somebody is making money by you even being present as a convention. So the church has power. You just got to demand it. You're not a grasshopper. I'm going to tell you what I want. And that is how I move. It's not arrogance. It's I know who I am. I know that. And when we as a church realize that collectively, we're undeniable. We are truly undeniable. You telling me it's 1,600 churches in the convention? You ain't nothing we can't do in North Carolina. You gotta be kidding me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go there. It's good. Yes, sir.
I would just like to say we're from St. John in Stokes, North Carolina, from Greenville. We have what they call the Youth Incarceration Prevention that's going to be coming up in June for the Youth Incarceration Prevention, which we got the sheriff, the mayor, all of them involved into this event that's coming up. But the problem is we can't get the churches to come together to help us with this. St. John has sent out flyers asking them to bring their youth. We can't get them to do it. We don't go out and ask for funds. We just ask anybody for donations. We go to the town commerce in Greenville, and we have all the sheriffs, the mayor, all of them to speak, and different things going on for the youth. But we cannot get the parents or the churches to bring their youth to their convention that's coming up. We have a youth incarceration program where we go to the prisons. We can't get enough people to join the two members that we have there that goes. One person can't go in there with the prisoner. It has to be 2. We can't get enough to join, to go with them, to go to the men or the women. So what do you do in a case like that? We can't get them to work with us. We got flyers out now. We got on the radio and everywhere to come to the youth incarceration in Greenville at the town commerce. And it's 8 years, and we don't get no help. Our church support our own. Thank you.
I hope I'm saying this right. I always said, if our churches, once our leaders, our heads, would come together, if our churches, our pastors, would get together and come together in a talk of something and come to agreement, because our kids is hurting. I always said to me, because this is what I used to do years ago, that it's being said that the members, the pastors got members and they can go to the street, but you can't send us to the street without you being to the street. It has to take the pastors to come together and say, let's go to the street. You cannot go to a person in the street that lives in the street, that sleeps in the street, and say, God loves you, and I'm going to pray that he sends somebody to bring you food because you need to be saved. You can't do that kind of talking to the street, because I used to go to the street. You have to show them some love. Feed them. Show them that you care. Pick them up, put them in a hotel, find a place to go to them before you talk about salvation for them. So to me, if our leaders in our counties will stop being so, excuse me, envious, jealousy, and stop putting it on, it's my church. But when we start saying it's God's church and we are God's people, that we can come together and decide what can we do. But if we would stop saying that, and we stop wanting so much credit for our churches, and start saying we're going to come together and see what our churches can do. Because when I read the gospel, it's one heaven and one hell. And you miss heaven, you're going to hell.
All y'all have good points, and everything has been good today. Number one, it's you. You're afraid of your own kids. They have their own room and you can't go in there. In your own household. And you talking about kids, I done worked with all level of kids. I done been AAU. I done coached college ball. They didn't even know how to put on their own clothes. They don't know what size they wear. You moved out your neighborhood. You left your neighborhood. You don't go talk to no kids. You're afraid to talk to the kids. I've been with the hoodlums. I ran with the hoodlums. I know about hoodlums. My mama didn't like it. But I ran with them to see how they think. You don't even know how they think. They change music on you. They change their hairstyles on you, and you let it be. Their pants went below the neck, showing it behind them that's on the wells. And you took it. But you're supposed to be a Christian. The only thing now, you love Christianity because you're trying to go to heaven. You ain't trying to get them in heaven. You ain't trying to get them in heaven. I work with ushers. We just had a one-day session. One group of kids came, 12, came out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Oak City Baptist Church. I had one usher working with me. She said, Mama, I'm on the girl. She told her mama what to do. Then now kids are dictating to you. You let them dictate to you. But you taught this Christianity. God said, all the children come unto me. You don't ever go to them. I spent money out of my pocket. I did it in college. I did it for junior high. I helped kids. I gave them clothes. They wore my clothes. I worked at a school. You got to help your kids. You got to pick them up. You letting them trail in the dust, it's your fault. It's your fault.
So I think that's a good one to close on, but just one last word, Blueprint. I think that if the convention decide they want to do something like that, get together, put it in a central location where you want to do something like that, the mentoring program, the program that you talked about, and maybe collectively you have delegations from all over the community, the convention, get together and convene in that one place because there's strength in numbers. Again, I've enjoyed myself. I love you all. And my brother, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Come on, let's give the sheriff. Let's give the sheriff, let's give the sheriff a hand. Thank you, Sheriff Kimbrell, for your information. Thank you for sharing with us. He will be around to get to share with him. It's time for our next class. It begins at 4. Look on your schedule. Again, thank you, Sheriff, for blessing us with that profitable information. So those of you who wish to take a break, you have just a few moments to go to your next class. I need a program. Who has a program? Our next class begins at 4 to 4:45. The constitutional update summary, if you're interested in that, will be held right here in the sanctuary. Congregational care class taught by Dr. Thomas Farrell will be held in the music room, and there are persons in the hall to tell us where to go. And church's response to grief and loss, Dr. April Reinhardt, she will meet in the chapel, and over to my left. You're right, make the right and go up the hall, as Dr. Barr stated earlier. So again, if those of you who are interested in the constitutional update summary, the class will begin in just a few moments. We have about 3 minutes before we can transition, that the constitutional committee would come. So if you wish to go to the facilities, you may do that and return back here at 4 o'clock. It begins 4 sharp. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Military. I feel the structure, that's good.